We just recently welcomed in the new year of 2024 with the NBA season in full swing. But this got me thinking. Nowadays, we can turn on the TV and watch stars like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and even the older guys like LeBron and Steph Curry light up the league. But who will be on top of the NBA world in 2030, 6 years from now? So, in this video, I'll be predicting the top 20 NBA players in the year 2030. And as you guys could probably guess, there's bound to be some big surprises. We're going to go from numbers 20 to 10 pretty quickly, and I'll break down the top 10 in more detail. This is Next Man Up. Let's get straight into it. For some quick honorable mentions who just missed the list, I think it's only appropriate to shout out Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox, Bam Adebayo, and Alex Sarr. All of these guys will be studs in the league in 2030, but they're just outside my top 20, and I think you'll start to see why. So now to officially open up the list, at number 20, I have Tyrese Maxey. In the year 2030, Maxey would only be 29 years old, and I feel as though that we've only seen the beginning of his scoring dominance so far. Maxey could realistically be one of the best scorers in basketball by 30 years old, especially if he keeps his three-point shooting sky high. At number 19, I have AJ Dembonsa. AJ Dembonsa is our first player on the list who isn't currently in the league. AJ currently plays high school ball at St. Sebastian's, and he's only 16 years old, making him by far the youngest player in consideration for the top 20. But AJ is already 6'8". He's by far the best player in his class, and with insane offensive ability, he would still have 4 years after he's drafted to make it onto this top 20 list. I think he absolutely has the talent to, so he's going to make it here. At number 18 is one of the league's current greats who I mentioned earlier in the video. This is where I have Joel Embiid. I have Joel Embiid here, and he's going to be 35 years old come 2030. There's a good argument that Joel Embiid is the best player in basketball right now. I think that would be the truth. But with his physical style of play, and as we know his injury history, I don't think he'll be one of the best by the time he's in his mid-30s. He would be 35. He'll still be great, but you have to think that the wheels will fall off just a little bit. At number 17, I have Scoot Henderson, who will only be 25. Scoot Henderson has had a really tough break this year, but he was a top 3 pick for a reason. I still think he'll be a stud. His playmaking is all there, and he continues to cut back on the turnovers, which is a good sign. I also think he'll build a more creative scoring game. Scoot has the mentality to be one of the best, and at 25 years old, I think he'd be a surefire top 20 NBA player by 2030. At number 16, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like Joel Embiid, who I put at 18, Giannis will be 35 years old come 2030. Giannis is an insanely efficient player, and his generational defense is what keeps him higher on this list than most of the older guys, because I don't think he's losing that anytime soon. I do worry with Giannis, though, that he might not even be in the league by 2030, as he's a guy who's considered hanging it up early, so this is a risky selection. At number 15, I have Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes is finally starting to flash superstar potential in Toronto, and we know that his coach thinks he can be the face of the league in due time. He would only be 28 years old in 2030, which is most players' sweet spots for their prime production. Scottie Barnes is becoming a productive scorer, can crash the glass, and with more opportunities to run the offense as a point guard, he's racking up some assists along the way. Will he ever be the face of the league like Coach Darko said? Maybe not, but I think top 15 is easily in reach. At number 14, I have Chet Holmgren. In what is truly his rookie season, Chet Holmgren is showing why fans should be confident he'll be one of the best bigs in the league in no time. He'll only be 27 in the year 2030, and he's already convinced me that by then, he'll be one of the league's best shot blockers while still being an electric stretch 5. Not to mention in 6 years, Chet will probably have some extra weight on him to help him make plays in the painted area. I think he's set up for great success. At number 13, I have Alperen Sengun. Alperen Sengun has been getting many comparisons to the multi-time MVP Nikola Jokic. By the time Sengun is 27, I can see him being fully developed into a playmaking back-to-the-basket big like Jokic. With that being said, I think it'd be hard to convince me that at 27 years old, Sengun will be nearly as refined as the great Nikola Jokic. The Rockets have plenty of young talent, and if Sengun sticks in Houston, he could easily be their go-to guy, and I think the top 10 is well in reach. At number 12, I have Paolo Banchero. Paolo Banchero was the Rookie of the Year last season and has looked like a stud in his sophomore campaign. At only 21, we're seeing Paolo play at an all-star level, so I can't imagine the things he'll be doing by 27. Paolo's explosive play and his greatly improved confidence with the ball in his hands makes me think he's not only a guy who could score around 30 points a game, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's dropping double-digit assists every once in a while. We've seen Paolo's potential already, and I have no doubts he'll be one of the league's best in due time. And to round out that 20 through 11 tier where I'm going rapid fire, I'm going to end it with Zion Williamson at 11. Zion is a player who is incredibly hard to project. We all know that at his best, Zion could be one of the best players in the world, but we never really know how his health is going to hold up. At age 29, I'm hoping Zion is healthy and his finishing ability is at an all-time high. We know Zion's athleticism and size makes him a matchup nightmare, and by the time he's a vet in this league, I have no doubt that he'll have a key set of go-to moves that makes him almost impossible to stop. Alright, so that's 20 through 11 on my list, and I went pretty quick with those explanations. We are officially entering the top 10 for the best players in the year 2030, so I'll dive in a little deeper. Let's start with number 10. At number 10, I have Ja Morant, who will be 30. As most of you know, Ja Morant will be missing the rest of this season with an injury to his right shoulder, and people are already lining up the comparisons to him and young D Rose, another explosive guard who just went through injuries. Unlike Derrick Rose, Ja's injury should not hinder his athleticism going forward, and we've seen him not only put up all-star numbers in years past, but borderline MVP stats in some if we're being honest. When Ja comes back, he'll have even more time to develop his skills and show the NBA world, who is quick to turn on young players, what he really brings to the table. He can score at will, pass the ball, crash the boards, and he is athletic enough where I have no doubts that even at 30 years old, he'll still have plenty of gas in the tank. Don't be surprised when Ja is still one of the league's best by the year 2030. At number 9, I have Ron Holland. We leave the stretch of young NBA talent to go to a guy who hasn't even made it to the league yet, Ron Holland. If his name sounds familiar, it's because he's the leader of the G League Ignite, and he was one of the highest ranked high schoolers we've seen in the last couple of years. Holland found his way into the number 1 spot of my most recent mock draft that we put up a couple of weeks ago due to his incredible athleticism and creativity as a ball handler. Holland is a small forward who moves like a point guard, and he gets to the lane like a prime Paul George. Not to mention, he's up to shooting production from high school, making him a threat all over the court. As I see his defensive switch ability improving game by game for the Ignite, it's hard for me not to see him as a potential NBA superstar, so that's where I'm going to mock him. At number 8, this is where I'm going to put Nikola Jokic. At a projected 34 years old, Nikola Jokic is the oldest player to find himself within the top 10. Fans of the channel know I love Nikola Jokic, but there's much more thought behind putting him this high above his peers, such as Giannis and Joel Embiid, and unlike the two mentioned, Nikola Jokic's game relies much less on his athleticism, and he's shown that he's a tank who rarely misses time to injury. With such a fundamental play style, I see no reason why his production should decline much into his older age, especially because most of his download production is helped by his weight, something that he probably won't lose in his older years. If Jokic chooses to pursue basketball into his late 30s, I don't think Father Time is going to come after him as hard as some of the NBA's other stars, and Jokic has done nothing to make me think that he's going to slow down anytime soon. And number 7 is where I put Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton is another star we recently saw go down with an injury, but luckily it doesn't seem to be too serious. I loved watching Halliburton at Iowa State in college, and to see him get his flowers as a young star in the NBA is absolutely incredible. By the time Tyrese is 29, he could be on pace to shatter assist records while still being one of the best scorers in the entire league. His mechanics are perfect, even if his jumper looks weird, and he hustles for loose balls. He's the mold that teams will look for a point guard going forward. If Tyrese stays on the pace he's on so far, 7 might even be a little bit low for the dime-dropping Indiana Pacer. At number 6, I have Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg is taking the high school basketball world by storm, and for good reason. Cooper Flagg is a power forward with borderline NBA center size who handles the ball and shoots like a guard as he leads the best high school basketball team in the country at Montverde. Cooper Flagg came out of a small town in Maine and has now been battle tested against the best of the best in high school hoops. He's everything you want as a player, and if somehow his offensive intangibles don't work at the next level, his defensive instincts 100% will. We'll see Flagg likely be a one and done next year for the Duke Blue Devils and come into the NBA with a full head of steam, which is a dangerous sign for anyone who wants to get in the Mainers' way. So we're officially in the top 5, and at number 5, I'm putting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Whether you like it or not, Shai is here to stay. I mentioned Tyrese Halliburton as a guy who could be the mold for the future NBA point guard, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the improved version of that mold. Shai is one of the most fluid ball handlers and pull-up shooters in the league right now, and we still see that improving what feels like every month. Not to mention, he's built himself a great back-to-the-basket game, which is flying under the radar. Shai has made every spot on the court one of his sweet spots, and with a well-built Thunder team around him, he'll definitely have some accolades by age 30. SGA has got to be top 5 if we're talking about the league in 2030. At number 4, I'm putting Anthony Ant Edwards. I really like Anthony Edwards, and choosing between him or SGA for this 4 spot was really tough. But not only does Ant have more high-profile athleticism to work with, he'll be 3 years younger, which helps him in this situation. Anthony Edwards was entirely worth that number 1 pick, as he's proving that he can turn this Minnesota franchise into contenders, unlike some of their young stars like Karl-Anthony Towns did in the past. Ant can beat anyone in the league off the dribble, and I can't go without mentioning his spot-up shooting ability. Ant has the killer mentality to work with at being the best player in basketball, and by the year 2030, I think he's going to find himself pretty close. At number 3, I have Victor Wembanyama. We all have seen the tremendous amount of hype that Victor Wembanyama has picked up during his rookie campaign, and whether you want to admit it or not, he'll be one of the faces of basketball by 2030. You can't teach 7-4, but you can teach elite finishing, rim protection, pick and roll scoring, self-creation, and work ethic, and Victor is elite in all of those categories. Despite his slim frame, we've also seen him avoid the injury bug early in his career, which is a good sign for his future. If he looks like this as a rookie, I can only imagine what he'll look like when he's more developed at 26 years old by 2030, and I think we all know the answer will likely be incredible. At number 2, narrowly missing out at number 1, I have Jason Tatum. At only 25, Jason Tatum is already a borderline top 5 player in the NBA. So with more experience under his belt, I don't see why he wouldn't be at least top 3. Tatum can score from anywhere on the court, and he possesses a certain it factor where at any given moment, he could get your team multiple clutch buckets in a row to close out a big game. By 2030, you also would think that Tatum would have picked up an MVP or a ring to boost his resume, and in an elite defensive system in Boston, maybe he'll start to get recognition for being a solid defender as well. Tatum has all the tools to be one of the league's best, and considering there's an argument for him already being one of the elite, it's going to be really hard for me to keep him out and keep him away from the top by the year 2030. So guys, that brings us to number 1. We've talked about some of the NBA's elite young talent and some of the best young prospects in the entire world, but it is time that we predict who will be the best player in the league by 2030, and I don't think it's going to surprise anyone. Luka Doncic will absolutely be the league's best player by the time he's 30 years old in the year 2030. If you ignore the stats and award races and you just watch basketball, Luka has a case for being the best player in basketball right now, and he's only 24. At 30, there will be no denying the magic that Luka creates every time he puts the ball on the floor. And unlike other young studs that rely on foot speed and high-flying plays to prove that they're elite, Luka will be able to play his signature style until he's a vet. Luka gives you everything you want as a player, and whether by the time he's 30 he's still playing in Dallas or not, he'll be one of the most elite talents we've ever seen league-wide, and do not be surprised if he has some hardware to go along with it. Alright guys, that's going to do it for my list. Let me know in the comments, did I leave anyone off? Was your favorite player too low or too high? And who do you think will be the NBA's best player by 2030? I would love to hear your hot takes. This was Colin from Next Man Up. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good night. Peace out.